Everyone, we will now call the February 5th, 2024 board meeting to order. Mr. Gaither, will you please call the roll?
Representing Education District 1, Ms. Katie Howard.
Present.
Representing Education District 2, Ms. Loretta Balden.
Present.
Representing Education District 3, Dr. Ken Zeff.
Present.
Representing Education District 4 and Board Vice Chair, Ms. Jennifer McDonald.
Present.
Representing Education District 5 and Board Chair, Ms. Erica Mitchell.
Present.
Representing Education District 6, Ms. Isha Collins. Representing Education District at Large Seat 7, Mr. Alfred Searby Brooks.
Present.
Representing Education District at Large Seat 8, Ms. Cynthia Briscoe Brown.
Present.
Representing Education District at Large Seat 9, Ms. Jessica Johnson.
Present.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Now, I will now entertain a motion to approve the minutes of January 8th, 2024, fourth board meeting minutes.
Second.
I have a motion moved by Board Member Collins, second by Board Member Briscoe Brown. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Is there a motion to approve the February 5th, 2024 board meeting agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Board Member Briscoe Brown, second by Board Member Collins. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Dr. Battle, will you please bring the work session items?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have 3 presentations today. First, we will have a board member requested presentation for an update on district athletics presented by Corey Collier. Next, we will have a strategic plan update, a monthly financial update, which will provide an update on district financials, including FY 2023 monthly general fund finances, quarterly student activity report, proposed budget adjustments, and FY 2025 budget development update. And our final presentation is on student outcome-focused governance, or SOFG. Today's presentation is on Guardrail 4, Interim Guardrail 4.1. Mr. Collier, we're now ready for your presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Battle. Members of the board, my name is Corey Collier. I am the new Director of Athletics for Atlanta Public Schools. And my presentation today is entitled 2024 and Beyond for the Department of Athletics. Here's a little information about family-wise. Married with 3 kids. I've been in education for 9 years, received a bachelor's degree in mathematics, received a master's degree in secondary mathematics and my education specialist in ed leadership. I've taught a multitude of different maths, been in athletic administration for 9 years, a part of the GADA, which is our state organization, and I'm also a member of our National Athletic Directors Association. The Department of Athletics is comprised of 5 individuals, myself. We have 2 assistant directors, Mr. Rendell Jackson. He leads our middle school ADs. He assists them with any type of inventory that they may need, any type of budgeting assistance or compliance for our APS schools. Also, we are in the process of currently interviewing, which will be in this month for an assistant AD position. And the expected date of that board will be for that particular person to be approved by board approval in March of 2024. That particular individual will lead our high schools ADs, also our athletic trainers, and they will also each one will have additional duties and responsibilities as assigned by myself. We also have 2 other members within our department, which are our admin assistants, Ms. Womble and Ms. Clark, and they do a great job of allowing us to be able to reach our schools, be more visible within our schools and work more closely with our AD. The Department of Athletics, the model that we will continue to use and which has been pushed out from our governing NIAAA will be education-based athletics. And within education-based athletics, if you notice from the mission that you see right here, it states that we're going to preserve, enhance, and promote education-based athletics, basically throughout the development of our department. And so what we are doing, we are going to continue to complement the experience of our student athletes and coaches within the within Atlanta Public School. We're still going to complement the core values and continue to complement those core values that we have within Atlanta Public Schools. Every voice matters. Equity at the forefront, students and schools come first, culture that cares and embrace a drive for change. We also want to continue to strengthen the partnerships that we have within the Department of Athletics, but we're also going to work with our APS Partnerships Department to reach out and find those additional partnerships that we can to use to help as additional resource for our department. Within the Department of Athletics, we're going to continue to have our data-informed decisions. In the summer of 2023, we worked with our data information group to create an athletic dashboard. That athletic dashboard told us, or is comprised of academic data, attendance, and behavioral data. And with that data, we can then determine how are our student athletes, how they compare with the rest of the student body within a particular school. We're also going to use data from our inventory, not only just our district inventory, but also from our school inventory. Having those conversations with our school ADs, that communication piece, getting them to submit inventory, which will then help to drive the budget that we would need for the upcoming school year. We're also going to have be more involved within our NIAAA course completion or certification completion process. Being the state director or state chairperson for education, that allows me to be able to see the things that our ADs will need, courses that they need to take, maybe workshops that they need to get involved in to help specifically for things that they may need assistance with within their school. Leadership development is going to be key. Within our department, we're also going to be looking at NIAAA learning training course that's from our national organization. We're also going to continue with our monthly meetings. Those monthly meetings will allow us to be able to disseminate information to them that will come down from district or state level. We will continue to do peer networks or create peer network with our AD. That way it will allow them to be able to communicate with each other. And one of the initiatives that we're pushing this year is cluster vertical articulation. We want our different schools, our middle schools and high schools within those clusters, we want them to be able to communicate with each other, talk with each other. The ADs, we want them to be talk with each other so that we can figure out what's the process, what are the things that we need to put in place to keep the kids from the cluster middle schools going to the cluster high schools. This slide talks about the different sports that we offer within our high schools. And the X's show, this is the data that was from SY23. The majority of our high schools are able to field all sports, but we do have some that aren't able to field sports, and the X's show the sports that we do have. There is a intent to participate survey that goes out from GHSA each year, and it's typically due March 1st. And that intent to participate survey basically tells GHSA what sports do you want to participate in for an upcoming school year, which then allows you to be able to participate in any postseason activities that are allowed within GHSA. This is our middle school slide, similar to the high school, shows you the different sports. Once again, this is data from 2023. It shows the different sports that are offered within our middle schools, but it also shows you specifically which school was able to field that particular sport during that SY23 season. We have a few highlights from the fall 2023 season. Jacob Pulliam, he did win state championship in cross country this year. He's a single winner. We had 2 team state champions from our charter schools, Atlanta Classical, boys and girls in cross country. We also had, for the first time, we had an All-American young lady in flag football. She was able to participate in the flag football All-American game in Frisco, Texas back in December, where she also scored a touchdown. We had Miss Sarah Paisley Owen. She is a freshman at Midtown High School, and she is currently going to participate in the Olympic trials in swimming. We had Miss Nadine O'Connor. We have Miss Nadine O'Connor, first year AD at CSK Academy. She was voted by her peers as the the region AD of the year for this upcoming year. And just for future, we have 3 teams, which is a first for Atlanta Public Schools, 3 teams, football teams that are going to participate in the Corky Kell Classic this year. That's Thurl High School, Douglas High School, and North Atlanta High School. We have 4 goals that we're going to really push within our department. We're still going to, once again, complement the core value of APS, but those goals are going to start off with leadership and servant leadership at that. We want our ADs, we want to measure the percentage of those ADs that are going to attend and actively get engaged with workshops, with professional development. We're going to conduct surveys because we want to know, we want to receive the feedback from our ADs, our coaches, our staff, to see exactly what it is that's working and may not be working. We want to make sure that we track that information. And with the measures or the metrics that we're going to use with this is we're going to aim for 85% participation from our school level ADs, and that includes middle and high school athletic directors. We want that feedback to be at least a 4.5 out of 5, and then we want to make sure that we're implementing at least 2 new initiatives or programs to help with that. One of the things that we're doing this particular year with this is we've started a book study, a monthly book study on leadership. Goal 2 is integrity. Integrity is one of the forefronts or pillars of our department, and we want to ensure those programs are going to operate with the highest level of integrity and ethical standards. We're going to continue to conduct regular compliance audits. We call them monitor reviews to ensure that our high schools and middle schools are in compliance with state and local rules and regulations. We're going to, one of the metrics for this is the goal is to achieve a 100% compliance rate. We want to decrease the ethical incidents throughout our entire department. And then one of the transparency initiatives is we want to publish those things, our monitor reports, each season, which is our fall, winter, and spring season. Next goal is accountability. Within the Department of Athletics, we want accountability to be there. We want all of our stakeholders to know that our coaches, our ADs take responsibility for their actions. We want to measure the time it takes to address those actions that are taken. We're going to track the percentage of goals that are successfully achieved. And with the measurements of these, we're going to do timely reporting of incidents. We want to target within that feedback. We want to make sure that it's a target of 90%. And we're going to do accountability workshops. And within the feedback from those, we want at least 4 out of 5. And finally, goal of equity. And within that goal, we want to make sure and ensure that all of our students have an equal access and opportunity to sports within the district. We want to track the participation rate of those students in diverse backgrounds, which our athletic dashboard allows us to be able to do. We want to conduct regular equity assessments, and we want to implement inclusivity initiatives, such as sensitivity training for our coaches and staff. The metrics that we'll use will be participation rate. We want to aim for rates that mirror our demographic composition within the district. We want to reduce or eliminate at least one disparity within each athletic season. And then also at the end, we want to make sure that with these initiatives that we're doing, we want to aim for an average rating of about 4.5 out of 5. So we do have a timeline. And with this timeline, there are 3 phases. And within each phase, phase 1, we want to gather feedback from our stakeholders. That's including ADs, coaches, student athletes, parents, community members. Because then we want to be able to analyze data as well. We want to analyze any existing data that may be out there. And we want to define clear strategic goals within this particular phase. And one of the things that we're looking at is we want to establish key performance indicators or KPI for these objectives, because we want to be able to develop a strategic planning document for this particular phase. Phase 2, we want to, is dealing with strategy development and implementation planning. And some highlights from this, we want to formulate detailed action plans. We want to finalize the communication strategy that we're going to use, because we want to ensure transparency not only to our schools but also to our community. We're going to implement transparency initiatives such as publishing financial reports, decision-making, athletic programs, because once again, we want to bring trust within or from the community. And we want to roll out community engagement projects. And we want to monitor and evaluate strategic initiatives for it. Phase 3 is ongoing. We want to establish a system of ongoing and monitoring for our strategic initiative. And we want to conduct periodic review of key performance indicators. We also want to solicit feedback from our stakeholders for effectiveness, because we know that allows us to be able to identify opportunities for refinement and some possible expansion. And then the last thing within phase 3, we want to foster a culture of continuous improvement. This slide represents our general fund budget, but we also discuss our special revenue, because we know that within special revenue, it enhances our efforts for scholastic sports within our district. And within the special revenue, we also discuss or have the athletic fund, which we use gate revenue to purchase items for that enhanced interscholastic sports, such as uniform. And that gate revenue is taken from our middle and varsity football games that are held at Lakewood and Henderson stadiums, but also from our middle and high school basketball games that are held on our school campuses. Here is an example of all the equipment that we annually give to our schools, but also we provide other equipment as needed. We have those one-on-ones with our AD, and we will continue to have those one-on-ones with our ADs, so that we can know exactly what it is they need in order for their program to be successful. The final slide is for our future projects. One of our future projects is a high school bleacher project for 10 of our campuses. Each one of those campuses will be allotted a certain number of bleachers, which will allow them to be able to host home games for sports such as soccer and other sports, but it also will allow them to be able to receive some additional revenue, which could then go into their athletic department, which can also help enhance and further the interscholastic sports experience that each of our student athletes have. That being said, are there any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Collier, for your presentation. Now we're entertaining any questions from any board members. Okay, yeah. Okay, Cynthia. Okay, you may go ahead, Board Member Briscoe Brown.
Good afternoon and welcome to your new position. We're looking forward to working with you, and these sound like great and well thought out plans. I've got one fairly specific question and one more general one. Let me just do the specific one first, and that is with reference to special revenues from ticket sales at Lakewood and at Henderson. Do you have an estimate of how much each of those bring in a given year?
It is, I don't have it with me right now. I can get back with you
Okay,
on that particular, for those particular financial.
okay. Just curious on that. And the larger question, we have obviously incredibly rich and varied offerings on teams throughout APS. We have schools that have all the schools have multiple teams. what are we doing to encourage students who, like me as a teenager, would never have either gone out for or been accepted on a team, to encourage lifelong physical activity and physical health?
I will have to refer that question to our academics.
So within our middle and high school curriculum, we have our health, our family consumer sciences, our life science courses. And those courses teach students about lifestyle, active living, nutrition, decision-making. And then throughout our curriculum, we build in character activities, leadership development, teamwork. So that would be addressed in our curricular program. And our goal is to make sure that students belong to something. They feel a sense of belonging. And so whether it's a sport, whether it's a club, whether they are participating in drama, whatever it is, we want our students to be involved. And our curricular program does address those very things that you talked about, encouraging our students to be active lifelong.
Do we still have any no-cut teams?
We don't necessarily have the no-cut teams, but what we do ask our ADs to do is if there is going to be any type of cut, then there needs to be some documentation there to support what does it take in order to be involved with a team. That way you're able to share that information if that particular student athlete does not make the team that they have tried out.
Okay, thank you.
Board Member Collins?
Thank you. Great presentation. I really appreciate it. And yeah, and welcome. Congratulations on the new role. A couple of questions I just wanted to ask, just kind of going down. Slide 11, you did this deep dive into the next steps of, it's sort of like your timeline in terms of the next steps moving the work forward. And I know we're in February now and just thinking about the timeline. Just wanted to understand the first question. In terms of engagement, what does that look like for the athletics department? Will it be launching a survey? Will it be, taking feedback at sports events? What does that look like? And the reason why I just asked that, I know we get the question, so we want to also be, good stewards to be the messenger for you all as well. So just curious to hear your thoughts on what does that engagement look like for you all in the athletic department.
So we will be sending out those feedback surveys. We are going to work closely with our strategy and engagement office to help assist us with coming up with those strategies of engagement to make sure that the correct feedback surveys are sent out or the correct surveys are sent out. We'll take the information from those surveys and gather that data together to determine what are the next steps for moving forward and improving whatever it is that is being asked.
Yeah, just keep us posted on it so we could just also push that piece as well. I definitely also want to highlight, I really, really appreciate the inclusion in the appendix. And just for the audience, slides 20, starting slide 20 to about 26, what just kind of lays out the offerings and what that looks like, because I know we also get a lot of questions on that as well, so I do appreciate you pulling that out. There were, that you talked about the eSports budget, and I don't know if this is a question for Mr. Hoskins or the team, or just thinking about what's the next step in terms of those projects, particularly on the athletic side. As you can imagine, I mean, we recently have gotten calls in terms of like our, facilities or our fields or things that students need. And so just kind of wanted to hear if there's any additional thoughts around those pieces. And if it is one to pause, then we can also pause as well. I don't know if there's any general information on when we'll have those conversations on like the eSports piece.
For that question.
Okay.
Mr.
Oh, it's okay. I understand. Sorry about that.
Madam Chair, excuse me, Madam Superintendent, members of the board, good afternoon. Excuse me. Board Member Collins, we're in the process now of doing design work. We have our actually, architects and folks working on the seating for the stadiums. It's recently brought to my attention about baseball field at North Atlanta High School needing some attention. Mr. Drake and his team actually, I think it was last year, employed some consultants to come in and do assessments of all of our athletic fields. So as we continue to collect our revenues for SPLOST and prioritize our projects, we will be taking a look at those assessments and engaging the appropriate contractors to start completing that work.
Thank you. Thank you for
Yes.
that. And I think it'd be good just to see, priority wise, because I also know South Atlanta also expressed like same issues with the baseball and football field as well. So just a follow-up conversation for the future. Thank you.
Yes,
Mr.
ma'am.
Hoskin.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
I'm good, Erica. Thank you.
Is that it, Ishay? Okay. Jessica?
Thank you. And so I guess a question related to Ishay's ask. I know some of the questions that have been bubbling up for us. And thank you for the presentation, and also happy to hear about the stadiums increasing and being repaired. But one of the questions that is bubbling up for us is access to the fields, and just curious how you might be thinking about some of the sports teams that have fewer members being able to practice, and kind of negotiating and looking at the logistics on some of those pieces, because I've been hearing a lot about that recently.
Thank you for that question. And one of the things that we're working with our athletic directors is to create a campus calendar. And basically it would include all sports. And of course, our GHSA calendar sports will have first dibs and first priority for those particular fields or courts. And from that particular point right there is more so just looking to see what is it that's available. Also ensuring that our coaches have different methods of practices, practice plans that may be available for them. Strategic plan for practices, which will then allow for additional use or use for different sports within the same season.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And then just want to note, I was really happy to see the academic support coaches available at
Yes.
each school. So thank you so much for that.
Yes.
Can I defer to Board Member Areta? She had her hand up right before me, if that's okay.
We'll just go down the road. We're at time for your portion of the presentation, and we'll just make sure we get
Understood.
everyone's questions.
I'll be quick. First off, thank you for the presentation. Thank you so much for being in service to our children here in APS. Congratulations on your new position. Esports is one of those areas that I think we're seeing a lot of national, international attention around. And there are many, many opportunities, but how esports is viewed from one community to the next differs. And as I looked at your list of schools that had esports team, I'm noticing that we don't have teams at Therrell, Mays, we don't have North Atlanta girls, we don't have one in Jackson or Carver or Best. And I think it is a huge missed opportunity if we do not seek equity in normalizing access to esports across our system. And I'm wondering if we are looking to be intentional about creating a system-wide esports league so that we can increase participation, normalization, and credibility for this new offering.
So with each of our high schools, esports was available for each one of them. I know that there was some funding actually given for each of those schools to have an esports program. And so the thing is just making sure that each one of them have access to all of the resources that are needed in order to get that particular program going. We did have one, we did kind of, I guess, do a launch last year of esports throughout the district. It was held at North Atlanta High School. I do know that currently the majority of our high schools do have esports within them, and so I would definitely get back with you to determine or to give you an exact number of which of those schools currently are fielding esports programs.
All right, and then my ask would be, if there are resources that are needed by our schools, the same way as we're looking at bleachers and other things, then could we get a report back to the board in terms of what the need would be if we were to create equity across our high schools and then start looking into our middle schools so that we can make sure every child across this district from one corner or another has access to those facilities at their school? Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Loretta?
Hey, thank you. So I'm going to try and be quick. So first one is, can you touch on trainers? In the past, there was a concern about having trainers at our school and for all of our sports. Can you touch on what is being done to ensure that our events all have trainer coverage, and also help educate me on who is responsible for doing that?
So within our high schools, each one of our campuses, because we know that CSK and BEST share a campus, each one of our campuses has an athletic trainer. Now, 5 of those are full-time athletic trainers, which are full-time APS employees. One of them is housed via CHOA with North Atlanta, and then the other 4 are with a contracted vendor that has went out and basically found some trainers. Of course, there's fully certified trainers, athletic trainers. So each of our campuses have one. They report directly to myself and to the athletic director, the local school athletic director. And from that point, they devise a plan to try and see where those particular trainers are needed throughout the individual day. Of course, we know it's only one person, and spring sports, as a matter of fact, is the time when you have multiple sports going on a campus at a time. So we've asked our athletic directors, along with the assistants from my department, to try and figure out a schedule to where they can actually be in different places to try and make sure that all of our student athletes receive some athletic training if needed.
Excellent. The other question I have, we'll keep it brief because you gave me a long, detailed response, but there is an appetite for metrics that tie back to student outcomes as it relates to our sports.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love to be able to hear or see how does sports impact discipline, attendance, grades, like what impact does that have? So people could see, if that is the case, that sports is bigger than just athletic activity, but helps with life skills, as well as could be the reason why some students come to school. So if you could just briefly talk about this athletic dashboard and how you plan to use this dashboard to bring those types of metrics to our attention.
So within that dashboard, it does give us data for academics. It breaks it down per class for each of our student athletes. An AD will give a roster to the registrar. The registrar would then go into Infinite Campus and and basically courses have already been created at each individual school. And so from that course, that data, which is the same data that goes into Infinite Campus for just the student body, is the exact same data that comes to our dashboard. And from that dashboard, we're able to see academics, behavior, attendance, and we're able to use that data to determine how does this student, compare to the student that does not participate in athletics, attendance-wise. Of course, we know there's some data that shows that student athletes tend to have higher attendance rates than non-student athletes, or behavior tends to decrease more than non-student athletes. But not only do we want that data to show that it happens during the actual season, we also want to show that that data is going to happen when the season has concluded. And so those are things that we're working with our athletic academic support coaches, which each school has one, or each campus has one. We're working with them to try and ensure that we can take that data, bring it all together, and then just disaggregate it and figure out what are the next steps? What else can we do with this particular data to help improve our student athletes, not just on the playing surface, but also within the classroom? They also prepare them for real life.
Yeah, I'm definitely eager to see that information, as well as how our students are faring after high school. For instance, there may be, who knows, I haven't seen the data, but there could be some sports like lacrosse that yield high participation post-secondary that could help us to want to field more sports like that. So I am excited and eager for the data as well as your mathematical mind. Welcome.
Thank you.
Anything? Okay, Katie?
Real quick, just echoing everything Board Member Balden asked about. And then appreciate you bringing up continuous improvement and innovation and piggybacking on Board Member Brooks's question around like how we best leverage and maximize what we have, considering our resources too, which are not unlimited, but we have incredible partnerships. In the city, we've already done great work there, but how we make these athletic opportunities available to all our students, but in a very strategic way. So look forward to hearing the student outcomes data and also seeing what you all are putting in place and trying some new things that may not always work out, but that's innovation. And then pivoting and adjusting. So thank you so much for this. Really excited to see what comes next.
Thank
Okay, Shivy?
I promise, I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine. I like this.
But one thing that I wanted to ask about is with our schools that tend to be overcrowded or more well-populated, the access and opportunity to participate in a sport then becomes more scarce because you have that many more folks trying out for a even more finite amount of opportunity to be on a team. What are we looking to create more equity for our schools where kids have a lot more scarcity of opportunity than at other schools?
I will have to get back with you on that particular process, and because it's difficult to just push that out there, especially with GHSA and some different things that we have to make sure we have in place. So I will have to get back with you on that.
Are we having any considerations for perhaps intramural sports or anything like that in lieu of them having less opportunities to participate at the more competitive level?
That would be a question I would have to get back with you.
Thank you.
Anything? I think we're, okay. Corey, thank you so much. I'm the one who asked for this presentation. As a mom of a two-sport athlete, I think the experiences these kids get are just incredible, right? What they learn about discipline and leadership and camaraderie that they get from high school sports is phenomenal. So, but with that comes a lot of questions that we get asked about everything down to like, what about the uniforms? And so I think I'm so excited to have this data about what your goals are. Just know that we will continue to ask and want to work in closer partnership with you because it is about transportation and esports and intramurals. The questions never end. Every track meet I go to, every football game, I get an awesome list of questions, but they're all fair questions, right? So we want to make sure that we're channeling that information to the right resource to get to you, but we have a lot of incredibly invested parents across the district. Slide 7 shows the kids are doing the work, and with all those numbers and all those great accolades come a lot of parents who still want to know, like, what is our strategy to just continue to improve? So there'll be more questions, but I really appreciate the work that you did to get it ready for today. Thank you, and congrats.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Collier. Dr. Bracken, we're ready for your presentation on the monthly financial update.
All righty, good afternoon, Vice Chair McDonald, members of the board, and Dr. Battle. Today I'll be presenting 4 topics related to finance. First, I'll provide you with the Consolidated General Fund financials for FY24 for all activities occurring in the months of July through December. I'll provide the quarterly student activity funds report, discuss the need for budget adjustments, and finally provide an overview of where we currently are in the FY25 budget development process. With the next 4 slides, we'll cover the FY24 Consolidated General Fund financials for the first half of the fiscal year. So far, we've collected about 75.61% of the total resources budgeted, with local collections at 89.85%, state at 36.57%, and other, which includes the Fund 150 Title I transfer in, at 44.66%. We're currently tracking ahead of pace for revenue collections as compared to this time last year. The variance between the pace of state collections from this year to last year is due to the timing of the payments from the state for the $1,000 stipends for eligible employees. We received the funds on December 29th, but we had not yet brought a budget adjustment to recognize that for the new revenue. On slide 5, we see the budget to actual expenditures so far for FY24. We have currently spent 46.16% of the budgeted allotments, and spending in all functions is appropriate for this point in the fiscal year. However, the pace of spend is leading last year by quite a bit, and we're monitoring that carefully. Slide 6 represents the current spending trend for FY24 against 23. The overall spend is ahead of last year's pace by 6%, a notable difference. For most functions, this is due to the timing of large expenditures and purchases and does not present a concern for the overall financial projections. However, we are bringing a budget adjustment for the charter and partner schools today for function 1000, which is instruction, to true up the budgets to the charter and partner school allocations, which will align the pace of spend to the budget more accurately. We'll continue to monitor both collections and spend and adjust as needed. Detailed financials can be found in agenda item 9.4. On slide 7, you'll see the summary for the FY24 second quarter student activity funds report. Compared to December FY23, revenue is up $160,000 or 7%, and expenditures are up $250,000 or 14%. This is due to an increase in collections for fees, field trips, and extracurricular activities. The detailed report can be found in agenda item 9.5. Slide 8 shows the expenditure activity for federal programs since the beginning of the fiscal year. As a reminder, title funds have a 15-month period of availability, July 1st through September 30th. And for consolidated funds, accounting is in the process of completing the first drawdowns of FY24. For ESSER 3, the district is in its final year and in the process of submitting completion reports for the first 2 years of the grant. Federal Programs has requested that all non-charter and partner schools were to enter all non-personnel requisitions this month, and charter and partners will in January, and charter and partners will have the end of this month. When compared to the year-to-date actuals, FY24% spend is higher than FY23, with the exception of Title I, Part A, Title IV, and Title A. And accounting are working, federal programs and accounting are working together to review variances, and anything that needs to be corrected will happen in the next pay period. We have 4 budget adjustments for the Consolidated General Fund for this month. The first listed here is an increase of $38,873 for both revenue and expenditures to consolidate the federal 21st Century Grant at the Barack and Michelle Obama Academy. We're requesting $976,163 to pass on the $1,000 stipends from the state to the charter and partner schools. The full revenue from the state and the expenditures for traditional employees were brought to you last month. We're bringing an adjustment of $27.4 million to true up the budgets for charter and partner schools to their actual earnings, and I'll talk about that in a future slide. And finally, I'm bringing a request of $523,361 in support of the Superintendent's Literacy Initiative. Details of these adjustments can be found in Agenda Item 6.1. Agenda Item 9.7 includes the detailed information reports for special revenue adjustments, less than $1 million, that have occurred in January. Slide 11 provides additional information on the last 2 budget adjustments. Each year, we recalculate the charter and partner budgets following the October FTE counts. This is a similar process to what we undertake when we do leveling at our traditional schools. As a part of the standard contractual mid-year recalculation, there is a need to adjust the budgeted amount for charter and partner schools for FY24 by $27.4 million. This increase is due to several factors. An increase in the local revenue from initial charter to partner school projections used in the district budgeting process, an increase in the QBE funding for charter and schools, driven somewhat by a larger T&E adjustment. And the primary driver of this increase is an increase in proportional share of charter and partner school enrollment relative to the districts as a factor in funding calculations. So as of the October FTE, our charter and partner school FTE makes up about 26% of the total district FTE. This was compared to around 23% in previous years. The budget adjustment for the literacy initiative will support the creation of 1.0 literacy specialist per associate superintendent and plus 1 lead literacy specialist at the district level. The funding for these positions will be prorated for the remainder of this fiscal year, and also certain school-based materials and supplies will be purchased within this fiscal year. We know that such a large request for usage of fund balance will prompt questions. Slide 12 walks us through the initial, current, and proposed usage of fund balance for FY24. The initial adopted budget assumed a beginning fund balance of $256.96 million and assumed a usage of fund balance of $35.8 million. This would leave an ending fund balance that was equal to 19.6% of total expenditures. Since the initial budget adoption in July, we've closed fiscal year FY 2023, and the beginning fund balance for FY 24 was revised upwards to $295 million. The usage of fund balance increased over the months for various budget adjustments approved by the board, primarily the carryover of school-based funds and consolidated carryover. The current percentage of fund balance to budget is 22.24%. With the adjustment recommended today, the usage of fund balance would increase to $68.7 million, and the percentage of fund balance to planned expenditures would be 19.24%. We've included some helpful benchmarks to determine what a good or strong fund balance is. The GFOA, or Government Finance Officers Association, recommends at least 2 months or 16.7% of fund balance. The board maintains a budget parameter that states we'll go no longer than 7.5% fund balance. And finally, there's a state cap to fund balance of 15%. In all cases, our fund balance remains strong, even with the recommended changes today. However, we've already put central office budget managers and senior cabinet on notice that in order to sustain this strong fund balance, we must use the FY25 budget process to roll off one-time expenditures currently paid for with fund balance or identify recurring revenue streams for those expenditures that will continue forward. The next several slides will provide an overview of the FY25 budget planning process so far, with an emphasis on the school allocation model, SSF, or student success funding. The current formula distributes about 60%, or $309 million, of the total school allocations through the weighted per pupil SSF formula. The programs listed in blue here are funded through SSF. An additional $207 million worth of positions and non-personnel allocations are funded outside of and on top of SSF. Those programs are listed on the slide in orange. Highlighted here is a new allocation equivalent to 1.0 counselor salary for schools to utilize as they see fit to bridge the gap of the step down of ESSER funds. This slide shows the SSF funds are allocated by weight, weighted categories, and stability supplements, and how the distribution has changed from last year to this year. There are many other reasons that a school's budget might change, other than simply changes to the formula. These include a change in the pie, or the allocations that are pushed out through the SSF formula, site-based enrollment swings, changes to the base requirements, changes in school demographics, and other impacts outside of SSF, including Title I eligibility, turnaround status, and signature programming. For instance, for FY25, we added funding for the capacity weight. The projected enrollment decreased by 578 students. We increased the base for average salary, including TRS and the state health increases. And also, as discussed at previous Budget Commission meetings, we intentionally reallocated to drive more through the base weight for all schools. The poverty weight was applied to 1,062 fewer students, increases for numbers of students served through ELL, SWD, gifted, and decreases for students served in EIP and remedial. Finally, we made some changes to weights, including changing the poverty weight from 50% to 47%, concentration of poverty from 5% to 3%, gifted and gifted supplement from 0.6 to 7%, and small school from 0.3 to 0.25%. Changes in enrollment are typically the most impactful change in a school's allocation from year to year. If a school opens to a large surplus or deficit, the first thing to do is revisit enrollment. If there are big swings, adjusting staff to match previous class sizes will typically address most funding gaps. Most schools can be balanced by simply aligning staff and programming to their current year's enrollment projections. Once staffing has been right-sized for enrollment, schools should review other factors. Position allocations for special education and other support positions can greatly impact the overall budget total. And non-personnel allocations for title, turnaround, signature, and other allotments can also have a large impact on a school's budget. Principals received their budgets on January 15th, and we conducted a half-day virtual training with principals on the 16th. Special thanks to all the amazing teams that showed up to support this annual process. And as an additional support, principals also received a file that walks them step by step through what changed with their allotments from the previous year. The first block on this slide shows the FY25 allocation. The middle is the FY24 allocation, and the last is what changed. For instance, at this school, the enrollment increased by 2, but the per pupil increased by $583. The overall allocation increased by $277,000. Factors impacting this budget included changes in the number of students served receiving the poverty weight, EIP, and the gifted weight. This school is also experiencing an increase in Title I and signature programming. And here we can see the new counselor salary equivalent that was added to all schools in the flex line. Our next Budget Commission meeting, which is scheduled for February 15th, will provide an update on the legislative process, include an overview of the revenue and expenditure assumptions for FY25, and provide the initial draft for the FY25 budget primer. Meanwhile, we continue to hold support sessions and trainings for principals and central office budget center managers. Guidance and assistance is provided during the development process. By early March, we should have a full picture of the requested expenditure budgets for FY25, and this will be matched against our projected revenue to determine where a gap exists. Budget proposals will be reviewed in detail, and requests will be prioritized. That concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll start on this side. Any questions? That's right, the mathematician. Let's go. Okay, Aretta, Katie, Ken, let me just write this down. It's new on the job. Ishay, Shivi, Cynthia. Okay, everyone? I'll just write everyone down. All the people, all the questions. Jessica, you want in? All right, let's do it. Okay, let's start down here on the end. Katie, Retta, would you like to lead us off?
Okay, hopefully mine will be quick because I had an aha moment. So I just want to make sure everyone else appreciates my aha. So I was struggling with the fact that initially when we were talking about the change in SSF, it was basically no one was going to see any less money, but the percentages were changing. But the aha moment is that we have increased the pie by $24 million. Is that correct?
Yes.
So it's not using that same piece of money and dividing out that makes it the same. It's a larger pot. So quick question, and I don't know if it's a simple answer, but where did that $24 million come from?
So, where you were seeing the 24 million though?
It was at the top of a chart. Let me find it. It was at the very top of slide 14.
Right here?
Yeah. Yes.
Let me verify that 24 million. I'm not
Ish.
quite, yeah, it's right around there. But basically, we do know that additional dollars is coming in to support the average salary. The state health increased by 60% last year. TRS rates are up. So some of that's going back into positions. It's just the cost of doing business. But new money that will be felt by all schools is about $8 million for that counselor flex position that's going into the allocations. And so that feels like new and additional for every school.
Okay, I also noticed when discussing the shoring up for the charter and partner schools that you mentioned that their percentage of students increased. Mm-hmm. And that is not because their actual students increased, but the total students in APS decreased. Is that a fair assumption?
That's correct. So the way that the state requires that we build the charter school formulas is we get a QBE sheet for the state, and we get a QBE sheet for each of the charter schools. And let's say Charter A is equivalent to 5% of the overall QBE sheet. They get the flow through of the QBE sheet, they get that 5% from the state, but they also get a 5% share of our local revenue. And so as local revenue increases, even if all of the percentages stay the same, they will see a proportionate increase. But this year, the percentages didn't stay the same either. So local revenue went up, and that school that was maybe 5% last year is now 7% of the overall QBE allocation. Again, because the QBE on this side goes down, not necessarily the charters went up. And so about 1% of local revenue is about $8 million. So for every 1% that is shifted, that's that's about $8 million that goes over. So if we were at around 23% previously and we're at 26% now, that 3% by the $8 million is about $24 million. And the other $3 million or so can be explained by some of the things like the T&E differential or just our local revenue going up.
Okay, and my last question, you did mention that principals did receive their new budgets
They did.
not too long ago. Just curious, what's the overall sentiment with the changes?
Yeah, the biggest changes that we're working through with principals is impacts of enrollment. We have schools that have large enrollment increases and large enrollment decreases. And so we worked really hard through the formula to try to offset. So most schools aren't seeing a lot of changes because of the formula. What they're seeing is even if enrollment stayed relatively the same, we saw big shifts in EIP allocations from the previous year. And so one thing we want to be mindful of is making sure that schools, as they're building out their school budgets, are maximizing that EIP allocation, because what we report to the state the next year is what we then use to allocate for their projected EIP in the upcoming year. And so we know that changes in the way we can count EIP students in the past few years has made that kind of rocky. It's hard to project year over year what we'll have for EIP. But that's a place where I think that we can really maximize funding, is just thinking about how we maximize serving students in EIP and remedial in our schools and maximizing that state funding coming back to us for that.
Okay, last question.
Sure.
How are our GO teams being supported in this new process?
So the process has stayed relatively the same. So the GO teams, the GO teams meet, the GO teams meet 3 times, I think about 3 times, 2 or 3 times during the cycle. They will first meet to establish their goals, the school's goals. They will then meet to discuss their budget projections, and then they'll meet again to adopt their budgets. So that's all staying the same. I will say that I've met with more GO team members this year than I have in previous years. A lot of GO team members reaching out to me for explanations on the process, trying to kind of understand what's changed and what's driving change. And then I'm assuming they take that back to their GO team meetings and have more conversation around that. Does that answer the question, or do you need any more? Drop the hook.
Great, thank you. Katie?
Great questions, Board Member Balden. Gets me really excited about the 15th and diving even deeper. Everyone, love to have your participation in one way or another. And you did a great job of explaining the charter partner stipend and other payment. Could you restate the timing piece again? If I missed it, I apologize, but why we have to pay it right now from the fund balance?
The stipend or the charter adjustment, or both?
Both,
Okay,
please.
sure. So the timing around the charter and partner just base allocation true up is we wait till after the October FTE counts. So we don't even get the information. We report, but then we wait for everything to be vetted and reposted for us to see where that actually landed. So we actually saw in December what these changes would be on our side, but that was some sticker shock for me as well. So we had the teams go back. My budget team met with the charter office. They reran all the numbers. I ran it using different ways. We just wanted to make sure it's accurate. So we could have brought it last month, but we wanted to do the due diligence to make sure everything was accurate. It is, so that's why we're bringing it this month. So it's just the timing of when we get those October FTE count final figures. So that's the timing on that one. The timing on the charter supplement and stipends, That one, we got all the revenue at once, and we received the allocation from our HR team about number of traditional employees that would receive that stipend. And the timing was off a little bit by the time we got the calculations from our the charter office on what their allocations would be. This was one of the most complicated funding formulas that we've had to kind of dissect, because again, typically when we receive money for the state for stipends, we receive it through that CPI report. We just say, this is how many staff we have, and they give us $1,000 for that. This is completely different in that we used the QBE funding formula. So they were looking at kind of the way we used to do our traditional funding formula, that if you have 25 kindergarten students, you earn 1 kindergarten teacher. School might staff 2, but you only earn 1. The charter QBE sheets don't include that staffing formula. So we had to go back and rebuild that formula for all of the charter schools just to see what their allocation would be based on the QBE funding formula. So we were trying to figure out, and we got a lot of guidance from the state, but we also have, some of the most charters, so we had the most to figure out, and a lot of it was us figuring out kind of hand in hand with the state. And so that's the timing that it took. That's why we couldn't bring it last month at the same time we brought the traditional schools.
That's hugely helpful. Thank you so much for that. And then we'll be talking about this on the 15th and other meetings about how we plan out. And I know you already, referenced that in the presentation for going forward, because clearly not taking this from fund balance and other things that we need to find other ways to fund. And also just talking about the realities of our district right now. Really appreciate all the work we've done with the Student Success Funding Formula and making sure our students have the resources they need, and working with principals and schools, but just having conversations about what is going on throughout the district and then tying everything back to our goals. And looking at Goal 1 and literacy, the initiative that is about to get underway, that yes, we should absolutely use fund balance for right now, considering the timing, but how we build that out and how we do it best strategically, right now with our interim superintendent, and then with us building out, again, stating our priorities and our goals with new leadership coming on, and how that's done so that we're best serving all our students at all our schools, again, recognizing the realities that we'll be talking about on the 15th too. So anything that we can do in advance, I know I've asked you about getting the presentation in advance so we can be prepared with questions, because we've got to tie this budget back to our goals while honoring our guardrails. So thank you so much for this update, and for clarifying some things we've all gotten questions about. And I will pause there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Those are great questions. Ken? Dr. Ken?
Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Dr. Bracken. The $27 million number caught a lot of folks' attention. Help me understand why there would be such a reduction of fund balance. If that just happened within schools, you wouldn't see that, right? If one school went up and another school would go down, that would not be an impact on fund balance. What's happening? And I think I know the answer, but what's happening that we have to pay? Because the district overall enrollment was not increased, so we have it actually shrunk a little bit. Why are we dipping into fund balance to pay $27 million for kids who are already in the system?
Sure. Fund balance is the timing, right? So just as Board Member Howard mentioned, if the bulk of the charter budgets and what we projected their enrollment would be, and what we projected the traditional enrollment would be, was built into the original budget, and we used local revenue and state funding and recurring resources to offset that. In the middle of the year, my local revenue projections aren't changing. I'm not foreseeing any new revenue or money coming in to offset this cost, and so it would be, fund balance is the stream that we could go to. The only other alternative would be to cut our way to it. So budget is, pluses and minuses, right? So if no new revenue is coming in, we either have to dip into our savings to pay for it because the need is now, the formula requires that we pay this now, or we have to decrease spending in order to free up existing expenditures to pay for it.
But if the number of kids we're serving are the same, we're spending more money than we planned, and it's because it's because we haven't made corresponding cuts in the central office to accommodate the spending? Is that where is the money, why is serving the same amount of kids $27 million more expensive?
Well, I mean, said inversely, the students have been there all year. We're just catching up with the budget. So it's not that it's costing more. If we look at our instructional spend for this, so far this year, the budget is catching up to the cost of serving students.
So the number of kids that are increasing going to charter is going from 23% to 26%. What's been the path of the central office during
So
those?
we'll see that play out next year in the budget cycle, because again, we didn't have this data until October, November of this year, but we didn't have it until November, December this year based on the October FTE counts. But that should inform our budget planning process for next year, because going into next year, charters no longer represent 23% of our students, they'll represent 26% of our students.
So we would need to make corresponding cuts in the central
We should plan
office.
accordingly.
All right, thank you.
Board Member Collins?
Thank you. Great question. A couple of questions. So in terms of the CARES funding with ESSER, I know the federal government just recently announced a possible, well, not, it is, there's an extension beyond September 30th, 2024 that goes, I think the district has to petition for, the state agency and the district will have to petition for what that extension is. I think my question is, we've earmarked and allocated all of our CARES funding to be spent down by September 30th
That's
this
correct.
year? Okay. And then my second question, just kind of also piggybacking off some of the conversation in terms of the changes to enrollment and the timeline piece. I know oftentimes in some of our schools where we have high mobility rate that's higher than our average, you'll have the low enrollment at the beginning of the year, and then we'll see this uptick of enrollment throughout that first semester, just based on high mobility. How are we, with the changes to SF, to our student success funding formula, school budgets, how are we weathering that? Because there's often this dialogue, it's like, well, I received my budget based on X amount of students, and by the end, I got 60 more students or 80 more students, but I didn't get the additional funding. Can you walk us through that and what that'll look like for this upcoming budget cycle for our schools?
Sure. So there's a few things that we do up front to try to mitigate the potential impact of students coming in later in past that leveling date. So we do build budgets, or like the schools are building their budgets right now with projected enrollment. Who actually shows up, the number of students that actually shows up in August could look very different. And so because of that, we do something called leveling at our 15th day count. And leveling tries to adjust the budget somewhat to try to capture, again, from the projections to where we actually are. There's a few things in leveling that, by its nature, build that cushion into the school budgets. So, for instance, a school that maybe we built the budget assuming 500 students, but they ended up having 495. So we would level 5 students. But when we build the budget, we're building the budget at the base with all of the applied weights. And so that's yielding a basic per pupil for each school of around $13,000. When we level, we're only leveling at the base. So we only level 5,000 of the 13,000 that they originally earned. So we're not taking the full amount during leveling that they're generating right now. So that right there builds in a good bit of cushion. The secondary piece of cushion that we're building in is that during the leveling process, the way we kind of explain it, is not a money-making endeavor. We're not trying to take any more from schools that are losing than what we need to provide that base allocation to schools that are gaining students. And so schools that are increasing, they're increasing at 100% of the base weight, but schools that are losing, they're losing at a prorated amount. They're losing less than even that full base weight. So the schools are there's a lot of cushion built in already for schools that are losing, If those students come back, their budgets should still be able to support that. The other piece that we do is we always allow about 20% of unspent non-personnel carryover to go into the upcoming year. And we also have school reserves that get released during that time frame. So there's an influx of funding. The third thing I'll say is that for schools that have title dollars, they should be expecting a second semester increase of carryover funding that will help carry those schools through the end of the year. The issue with mobility is that for our schools, when we've tried to look at mobility as a weight, mobility in, mobility out, mobility between, in district versus out of district, between our traditional schools and charters, impacts all of those allocations, and it becomes very complicated. And we see it's very correlated to the schools that are receiving high weights in poverty percentage. And so it'd almost be a duplication of weights to apply the mobility weight on top of the poverty allocation. And so for that reason, we haven't tried the mobility weight. But we do always work with schools when we see that there's an all of those factors still fail, and we see like a large influx of students at some point in the year. Last year, we had a school where the last 2 months of the year, we had to go in and revise their allocation so that they could get in contracted services and make sure they made it through the last few months. But, you know, those are really anomalies, and we try to build in as much cushion in the formula as possible so we don't get to that point.
I appreciate that, and I just know those questions will come up over the year. So I know for me, I'll probably circling back just in terms of encapsulating that into some solid talk points so that I can be able to explain that to communities. Last question. What is the average decrease, well, just on average, or you're thinking the decrease would be for a school, I'm referring to slide 19, to a school that is a poverty, concentration of poverty, and they're a small school?
Mm-hmm.
What is what is about the average loss that they will see, or not loss, or reduction or decrease
Mm-hmm.
they'll see in their budgets based on, it looks like there's a step, like a step down piece that is happening here.
Yeah, so it's going to be different school by school. So, for instance, this school, even though the poverty weight went from 50 to 47%, that weight is being applied to 21 additional students. So they're actually seeing an increase in their poverty allocation based on that. This is also a school, because their enrollment is increasing, they are losing the small school supplement, because every time that their enrollment grows, their small school supplement goes down. So all of those factors kind of offset each other. I will say, in general, one of the things that we really focused on in this budget was to try to increase that base per pupil. You can see the base increased by $141. That means every student in the building is generating $141 more than they generated in the previous year. That also means that same weight is being applied to a much higher base. And so that 57% that was applied to 51,093 last year is not that far off from the 47% that's being applied to 5,334 this year. The weight is being applied to a higher number. So that's part of the reason that we had to tweak those a little bit, because it was just pushing so much in those dollars that it was driving away from the overall intention of getting more out through the base weight. But to come out and say like exactly how much the impact was, there's so many different factors, and that's the reason we found that these sheets were very helpful for the principals to explain changes to their Go teams and even understand it themselves, because they can see how these things play with each other and the overall impact it has to their budgets. But we saw across the board, most every school, with the except, well, even the ones that had enrollment decreases, are seeing an increase in their per pupil, which is kind of the thing that we look at as an indicator of making sure that we are still being equivalent to the previous year or better.
And my last question, then I'll move forward. Just also, any decreases or any changes to the school budgets will also reflect the closing of CARES funding, I would imagine, right? And then any of like state or additional federal funds that we've received that are sunsetting. So if a school is actually experiencing a budget decrease, it may not fully be from this this formula on our end, it easily could be being the recipient of additional grant funds. And there's no plan on our end in terms of supplanting or supplementing that.
Yeah, we can't.
We can't, okay.
So in a lot of cases, if it's a federal grant that is sunsetting, or like this school, for instance, it's not a good example because their Title I is actually increasing. But if we had a school that their Title I allocation was decreasing, we can't come behind with general fund and true that back up. That would be supplanting of the funding. So, and the ESSER funding, there isn't that supplant rule with ESSER, so we can come behind and try to support. And that's why we've added that flex position this year to try to step down at least one position for every school. And the school has the flexibility to decide how they'll use those dollars. If they want to maintain one of those positions that were ESSER funded, or they want to do something different with it, that's really the school's choice, but we wanted to give them the dollars to be able to make that decision.
Okay, thank you.
Board Member Brooks?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lisa, for your presentation and for explaining so many of these things as clearly as you have. I have a question about the literacy component of the adjustment. There was an ask of, I want to say it's about $500,000. However, it says that it's for a lead literacy specialist as well as materials. And I was wondering if number one, if we could get clarification on how much are we talking about for the lead literacy specialist and how much are we talking about for materials, but also to kind of future-proof me even asking this question, that we could have more detail in the future as to what is being allocated towards what when we kind of put it together this way.
Sure, absolutely, and noted. We'll make sure, I've already talked to my budget team about how we can put more information into these budget adjustments and really have more detail building out to these. I will say that this budget adjustment actually supports 6 new positions, so it's going to be 5 literacy specialists, 1 per cluster, like 1 per associate superintendent, so not cluster, but associate superintendent, and 1 at the central office. But those allocations are also prorated for only the final 3 or 4 months of the fiscal year, because pending the approval of this adjustment tonight, we would still need to go through a hiring process. It's unlikely to get anyone on. But we want to make sure that those people are in place to help build out the plan to be implemented going into next fiscal year. So I think that's the timing around that. And Dr. Battle, if there's anything you want to add around when more about the literacy initiative will be communicated or more detailed plans, I'll defer.
Yes, that communication will roll out this week. When you had your board one-on-ones, I did an overview of it, but you will have the entire plan. So the plan is done. It's the support we need to get it to the ground, to get it to the schools.
And do we have any clarification on how much salary we're talking about? I understand we're talking about a prorated salary to last through the rest of the school year, but at the beginning of the 24-25 school year,
100%.
what type of salary are we talking about? And then I
Yeah.
think furthermore, when we talk about materials, what exactly are we talking about? Because if we had no positions at all and we just took, $530,000, and you spread that across the 53,000 kids that we serve, we're talking about less than $10 of materials per child. And is that sufficient? And now we're saying that we're talking about actually 6 different positions as well as materials. So is this evidencing that we're serious about, providing materials to help our kids to be more literate?
So I will say that this year's ask is different from what will be requested in the FY 2025 budget for next year. So this is some startup initiatives. And we have not yet created the job description for these positions. So we are using an average of what a specialist type position would be to come up with this. So for our calculations, I think we used $80,000 as a base salary, and of course, state health, TRS, and other benefits are stacked on top of that per position. And as far as the details of the planning.
Is there any clarification on what materials we're talking about?
Good afternoon. So what we are looking to be able to purchase right now are, as Dr. Battle says, just kind of the startup piece. Like, what do we need right now so that we can support professional learning-wise for our schools moving forward? So we are starting some of the module work with our teachers starting this month and next month. And so we want to make sure they have those resources. So if we're talking about decoding, if they don't have decodables, it's really hard to actually practice without those pieces. And so working with Yolanda Brown's office and our elementary director is really looking at what do we need to have in the hands of our teachers as we go through these modules. So not everything is needed right now, but there are certain materials that we need to be able to look at and purchase, so our teachers have those as they move into the professional learning piece.
Mr. Brooks, remember, in our one-on-one, we talked about the modules being free, but the stipend for the teachers, all of that will be on next year's budget. So that's when those millions of dollars will roll around, as well as the other material.
So for clarification, we're talking about materials for professional development for the teachers, not necessarily materials for instruction. That's what I'm trying to get clarification on.
Right.
Yes, for teachers.
Got you.
And except the decodables are for the students, those small books.
Yeah, there's different, we're looking at phonics cards, so if I am working with a child and we're doing Elkona boxes and they need the chips, the mirrors that kids would need to be able to see their mouth moving and formation and that kind of thing. So it's the resources they would need as we build those professional learning pieces.
Thank you so much for your clarification. My only ask would be if we could have a little better understanding of what the prorated salary looks like for right now. That way we can kind of discern better what is being spent on materials, what is being spent on personnel, and how that money is being used. So then, especially as we start looking at creating the next budget, you know, what is going to be sufficient to really make sure that we can execute this the way it should be.
Yeah, the ask for right now is being able to get the district support to be able to support in the schools. And then there's their ask for next year and direct support into the schools themselves.
Thank you.
Board Member Briscoe Brown.
Yeah, in the interest of time and in deference to all of my colleagues' wonderful questions, I have no questions.
Board Member Johnson.
And mine is super quick. On slide 14, one of the, I guess, positions that I did not see there was our SRO officers, and I know that we had spoken about increasing SRO officer presence in the schools, so can you kind of just share where we are with that?
Sure. So since the last time we talked about these slides, we did find out from the governor additional $45,000 per school from state funding around safety and security. And so I know our operations team is looking at what new revenue will come in versus how that would be used and how we would use that to support schools. And either way, with that funding being a separate state grant, we would need to track it separately. So we've decided to not push that in and commingle the funds with our SSF allocation, but we are continuing to think about how to maximize those state funds.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
One more question from Board Member Collins.
Just really quickly, can you explain to us more quickly what is the capacity? What is the capacity rate that is on slide 19? I see it didn't exist. Make sure I got two screens up. It didn't exist this last fiscal year.
Yep.
So what is that?
So this is a new category of funding that we've added this year. It's a capacity weight, which is kind of the exact opposite of our small school weight. And so based on, so our small school weight is applied to schools that have enrollment less than 450, less than 550, less than 650 at elementary, middle, and high school respectively. And it's applied only to the differential. So for this school that you see on this screen, there's 425 students. 25 students are receiving a small school weight. So on the other side of the spectrum, we have some schools that are greater than 95% capacity. And so for the enrollment that is above 95% capacity, we're applying a capacity weight to those students as well. So if a school's at 98% capacity, then 3% of their students are receiving that capacity weight. And that is a way, when we were working through with our schools and communities and around solutions for capacity issues, as is generally the case, a lot of what came out was the request for additional flexibility and money discretion to be able to address capacity in their schools. And so this is one way that we can do that. We committed during that process through the budget process, trying to support that. And so we do have that new way that's only applied to, I think, 3 or 4 schools this year.
So if they have a larger number of students, wouldn't they ultimately get more money based on just your base per pupil calculation period as well? And then we'll be layering that on again with the capacity. They'll get additional funding for capacity pieces?
Yes, so that's correct. They do have more enrollment on a per pupil basis. That means that their allocation is usually lower. And so this capacity weight is, again, only applied where capacity could create an additional challenge to the school. So based on our facilities master planning process, I believe that anything above 95% is those schools that we would look at as saying this presents a challenge. And so this is for those schools that are high enrollment and also might be facing their own challenges because of the density of students within their schools.
Only thing I want to leave with, and just piggybacking off of Katie, I think it's going to be extremely important as we go through this budget process to really align with our goals and guardrails, and then to Board Member Brooks to really understand the breakdown of this. Honestly, what gives me pause is what I'm looking at is that we're taking from, and I'm going to be, in full transparency, we're taking from schools that are already struggling. When we see a reduction in the poverty, concentration poverty, small school supplements, and they're already lower money because the numbers are lower and the baseline amount is the same. And then we're seeing this increase in larger schools, gifted programs, other areas, that it truly is going to send the message that we're taking away from those schools that need the resources the most, that are already at a lower level, and we're giving it to and that we'll be giving it to other spaces in other areas. So I think it's going to be extremely important for us to share what that impact truly looks like, and also thinking about, because we've gotten a text. I think that's why we're asking these questions in terms of wait, my budget is $500,000 less, and then my response is, well, what is the line item? 200 from CARES. We can't supplement. I get it, like we can't fill in the CARES gap based on pieces that you just shared with us. But I think it's going to be extremely important as we get to go down this process with this new formula to really, really put the actual dollars behind what we're seeing. So that's just my reservation there.
Yep, for sure. And we understood and anticipate that there would be questions and concerns around the perception of the changes in the formulas. And we started teeing that up at Budget Commission, I think as early as September. And so we do want to make sure that we're addressing those concerns and those considerations, and that we continue to try to inform and educate what's driving some of these decisions.
I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Bracken, for your presentation. I just want to remind everyone that we are going to continue this dialogue in partnership with the administration and Budget Commission meeting later on this month. But I would like to, I'm sorry, I'm reading yours. Go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Bracken. It is now time for us to engage in board goal monitoring guardrail 4, interim goal 4.1.
Thank you, Dr. Battle. I just want to do a quick reminder that all board members have their questions that they should ask during the monitoring session. We have current performance questions and future performance questions that are in alignment with our monitoring report. So as we begin, during the first year of implementation, school year 2022 to 2023, the focus of progress monitoring was solely on the board goals. The second year of implementation, school year 2023 to 2024, include progress monitoring of the board guardrails. The guardrails, as defined by the Council of Great City Schools, reflects the vision of the community and should not undermine the school system's ability to meet the goals. The Atlanta Board of Education adopted guardrails to reflect community values, priorities, and parameters in the areas of equity, stakeholder engagement, culture and climate, and innovation and accountability. While goals are focused on student outcomes, guardrail reflects adults' outputs. It is now time for us to engage in the board goal monitoring for interim goal guardrails 4.1. Interim guardrail 4.1 states the percentage of school needing Tier 2 and/or Tier 3 support in the district continuous improvement model will decrease from 37.5% in December 2022 to 27.5% in December 2024. I would like to take some time to review the norms and expectations for the monitoring session as Dr. Battle walk us through monitoring report. She will discuss the district's progress towards meeting interim goal guardrail 4.1. As we move forward, I have 2 points of clarifications. The community will note that guardrail statement do not have targets. Under the student outcome-focused governance structure, only goals are drafted using the SMART framework. In addition, the superintendent has identified interim guardrail measures and targets that are aligned to the guardrail statement approved by the board. Board members' comments and questions will be focused on creating an engaging dialogue with the superintendent. What are the factors that led to the current level of performance? Did the district make progress towards the guardrail? Why or why not? What strategies and resources worked well or did not work well? What challenges and adjustments are needed to be made? Will the district require additional resources to meet this guardrail? What supports do you need from the board to be successful? Please hold your questions until Dr. Battle had a chance to walk us through the entire report. Board member comments and questions should not be evaluative, be technical in nature, tell the superintendent what to do, suggest administrative actions, refer to data that is not in this report. If we stray away from our norms and expectations, I will remind us of the norms and expectations and ask that you rephrase your questions, comments to align with our norms and expectations. Dr. Battle, please walk us through the monitoring report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This month, we have our first opportunity to focus on our guardrails since the September report. Interim Guardrail 4.1 includes measures that are designed to help us monitor and adhere to our Guardrail 4, which addresses innovation and accountability. I'm going to start with Board Guardrail 4, Innovation and Accountability. The superintendent will not allow struggling schools to be without a comprehensive needs assessment, support aligned to the assessment, and if struggling persists up to 3 years, a high-impact intervention. Struggling schools are defined as schools where there have been no growth relative to the board relative goals for that school, where the growth has been sufficient to close the gap among the school's student groups, or whether growth has not been sufficient to close the gaps between the school's students and the district students overall. High-impact intervention includes, but are not limited to, school redesign, reconstitution, student transfer options, turnaround, in-district innovation, school merger, partnerships, and/or school leadership transitions. Interim Guardrail 4.1 is the percent of schools needing Tier 2 and/or Tier 3 support in the district continuous improvement model will decrease from 37.5% in December of 2022 to 27.5% in December 2024. Figure 1 shows that the percent of schools needing Tier 2 and/or Tier 3 support in the district continuous improvement model. This is the measure where we want to see a decrease in the number of students. Tier 2 and 3 schools include schools on the federally identified list. In 2024, this list included comprehensive schools and improvement, the CIS schools, targeted support and improvement, the TIS schools, and additional targeted support and improvement, the ATIS. It's important to note that the business rules for identifying schools for this list has been changed significantly between the FY23 school year and the FY24 school year. These changes were developed by the Georgia Department of Education and approved by the United States Department of Education. I would like to call your attention to the legend. The orange line represents our targeted line, and our blue line shows our actual results. Looking at the baseline school year 22-23, we can see that 37.5 of our APS schools needed Tier 2 or Tier 3 support. This amounts to 18 schools. In 23-24, that percent decreased to 29.2 of our schools needing Tier 2 or Tier 3 support, which amounts to 14 schools. The accompanying business rule for this report are noted below in the figures and tables. It should be noted that charter and partner schools are excluded from the calculation. Charter and partner schools who have identified on the state CSI, ATSI, or TSI list entered into a separate MOA with the Georgia Department of Education and are ultimately responsible for meeting the requirements of these MOAs and for any relative provisions in their contracts, their charter contracts. APS does offer additional support to these schools above and beyond what is otherwise offered to charter or partner schools, such as a provision of all partner school contracts. APS provides partner schools a proportionate share of funding that the district budgets for direct school turnaround services. These funds can be used by the partner school to help any way they see fit to improve their schools. Members of the office and charter partner schools or teams are available in partnering in the school improvement team meetings and professional learning opportunities facilitated by the Georgia Department of Education as a part of the support system for CIS, ATIS, and TIS schools. Federally identified charter and partner schools have access to professional learning opportunities offered centrally by our district and other federally identified schools in APS. As a reminder, our interim guardrails are designed to help us monitor progress towards our actual guardrails. I would like to call your attention to the color-coded legend which shows the status level: red below target, yellow developing, neon green on track, and forest green exceeding target. The data is showing us that we are currently exceeding this target level for interim guardrail 4.1. The number of Tier 2 and Tier 3 schools have decreased by 4 schools, or 8.3 percentage points. We exceeded our target by 3.3 percentage points. We realized that many of our schools were not federally identified because of the CCRPI progress scores, which measures growth. It is important that strong growth must be attained over multiple years before you see a significant gain in achievement. Table 1 shows that Tier 2 and Tier 3 schools for 23-24 school years. The list of federally identified schools that compare to Tier 2 and Tier 3 lists include targeted, the TIS schools, the CIS promise schools, CIS, and ATIS. The schools highlighted in green from 2023 school year column are schools that exited the federally identified list in the school year 2023-24 and will receive additional district support for 3 years. As a reminder, charter and partner schools are excluded from this calculation. This is why the list on Table 1 is different from the list on Tables 2, 3, and 4. Tables 2, 3, and 4 list our Tier 2 and Tier 3 schools that have been placed on the federally identified list for the school year 2024. Table 2 lists the CIS schools, comprehensive support improvement schools for Title I performing at the lowest 5% of all schools eligible for this identification. For high schools, low graduation rate is defined as 4-year adjustment graduation rate of less than 67%. The APS schools identified on the Comprehensive Support and Improvement List, which is the CIS list, are Continental Colony Elementary, Hank Aaron New Beginnings Academy for middle and high school bands, Harper Archer Elementary, Condesio 4th Ward, KIPP Sold, KIPP Vision Charter School, KIPP Vision Primary Charter, KIPP Ways Academy Charter School, KIPP Ways Primary Charter School, Michael R. Hollis Innovation Academy, Paul Lawrence Dunbar Elementary, and the Condesi School. Table 3 lists APS schools identified for the additional targeted support and improvement schools. That's the ATIS list. Additional ATIS schools are identified for having at least one subgroup that is performing in the lowest 5% of all schools. This includes Title I and non-Title I schools. The schools identified on the ATIS list in Atlanta are Benjamin E. Mays High School, Booker T. Washington High School, Centennial Place Academy, D.M. Farrell High School, Frederick Douglass High School, Herman J. Russell West End Academy, Martin Luther King Jr. Middle School, T.J. Perkison Elementary School, Thomas Slater Elementary School, Tuskegee Airmen Global Academy, and Woodson Park Academy. Table 4 lists the APS schools identified as targeted. The TIS improvement schools are identified for at least one subgroup that is performing in the lowest 5% of all schools in at least 50% of the indicators and components available in 2023 CCRPI. This includes Title I and non-Title I schools. The APS school identified on the targeted support and improvement is Carver High School Early College. This takes us to our next step. We realize that addition in schools and identified lists and other schools will need intensive district support to improve student outcome. We have committed to the improvement of student achievement and increasing proficiency and distinguished learners status in our schools. Now I'm going to address next steps for charter schools that have been placed on the state federally identified list. Although charter schools are afforded a high degree of flexibility and autonomy under the charter contract with APS and the Georgia Department of Education, this is in exchange for specific accountability goals. As it relates to the placement on one of the state's federally identified lists, APS has the following accountability expectations for these charter schools. If a charter school's academic performance results in the schools being placed on the Georgia DOE comprehensive list, the CIS list, targeted lists, or other federally identified school improvement lists for more than once in a 5-year period, including the previous charter term, the school will be required to, 1, conduct a root cause analysis to identify the causes of the performance issues that resulted in the school's placement on the list. 2, develop an improvement plan targeted on addressing the root causes. Both are the root cause analysis and target improvement plan shall be shared with the school, with the Georgia Department of Education, as well as APS. If the charter school's academic performance results in the school's placement on the Georgia CIS list, TIS list, or other federally identified school improvement list for a third time during a 5-year period, including from the previous charter term, APS shall immediately initiate a performance review of the charter school, contractual goals, and objectives to determine whether to pursue a mid-charter termination prudent to state law. As a part of the performance review, the charter will provide all information requested in the form of a brief petition for continuation of its charter contract for the remainder of its original contract. Support for the traditional APS schools that are identified as CSI, TSI, ATIS, or previously CIS schools. CIS schools will work collaboratively with our state school effectiveness specialists and Metro Recess school improvement specialists focused on the CIP goals, collaborative planning, including data-driven instruction, classroom instruction, building capacity, and effective leadership. Each of these schools, they're provided funds by the state and the district to support student learning. TIS schools do not receive a RESA support, but do receive district support from our turnaround coordinators. TIS schools are provided funds by the state and the district and will be used in alignment with the support of their subgroup of special education. ATIS schools do not receive state or RESA support, but do receive district support from our turnaround coordinators. ATIS schools will be required to have quarterly walks with our state support and our comprehensive review of students' IEPs. ATIS schools are provided funds by the state, and the district will be used in alignment with the support of their subgroups of special education. Previous CIS schools will gradually lose support over a 3-year period to allow schools to build some sustainability. These schools no longer receive state or RESA support. This support will be provided by the turnaround coordinators. Turnaround funds by the district will still be provided, but reduced over 3 years. We will need to continue to look at funding for turnaround support and initiative, and we also need to take a look at revising our interim guardrail 4.1 to better align to get the results that we're looking for. This concludes our student outcome-focused governing monitoring report. I'm now ready for questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Battle. Do we have any questions? Okay, hold on, let me get the roll. Roll call. Yeah, there's plenty of questions around it. Okay. All right. We just go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way down to 9. That'll work.
Thank you, Dr. Battle. And I'm so glad we have this guardrail in place and that we're monitoring it today. And the timing of this information coming out from the state. And I know you went through a lot of information and you followed up with some actions that are being taken. Wanting to understand, you know, what is being done, some examples of actions being taken to support schools that are on the list now that are newer to a designation, and those that have been designated in one way or another, knowing it's changed, shifted slightly over several years. But examples of actions being taken by Office of Innovation and Delivery or whatever group is doing the supportive work, if you could share any of that.
We get support. We get a school effectiveness specialist from the state of Georgia to support these schools. We also get a school improvement specialist from Metro RESA that they send to support all of these schools that are on the CIS list. In addition, this board has approved turnaround funds for schools for years. In the past, they've received, with those funds, they were required to buy reading specialists as well as a math specialist. So schools get a healthy amount of funds from that. We also have walkthroughs for these schools, as well as support from their associate superintendents. They know the work to go in and support the work that needs to happen in the schools.
And thank you for that. And that is extremely helpful in understanding some of the pieces. And we talked a lot of, or you referenced the root cause analysis that is required of charter schools and partner schools with the contract. Is something similar to that being done for schools who have this different designations that need some additional support?
Absolutely. All of our schools, and you notice in my feedback at the end what we can do to improve this, it is to not just look at our CIS schools and our TIS and our ATIS, because we actually have schools that are not on the CIS list that are performing below some of these schools, and that's because of the progress. This year, the state gave us credit for progress, but we know our goal is proficiency. So we keep going back to, okay, we improved this year, we dropped last year, we back up. It's like a seesaw. So we have to definitely shoot for progress. When you get progress, the growth is already there. So you don't have to measure for that. So just making sure we look at more than just our CIS schools, our ATIS schools, and as a district, we do. You fund our schools well. So it's more than, I think the root cause is having a systemic plan from the district, which starts with that literacy plan. And I know it doesn't look like a lot of money right now, but it's going to be a lot next year, guys, because we have to put our money where our mouth is. I don't think it's personally and professionally, it's not about how much money a school is getting, it's what we're doing with the money that we get. So we need to really focus on that this year. And when people come to board members, so I'm glad Chair Collins asked that question, because we know you get that, it's that pressure. But we have to stay true to it. And I always tell people, let's walk the schools and see, because there are a lot of people in our buildings. We are quite fortunate in Atlanta Public Schools. So I think we need to start there. So the root cause is it's a systemic, and we're starting with our literacy. Once we can get that going, which we will this month right here, it will make sure we will see that improvement across our district. In my report, I did talk about the difference from last year. Last year, they only looked at mastery and readiness. This year, they gave us credit for progress. And so when you get some progress, when you have been down here, it's going to look like you've grown a lot. But it's going to take more systemic, direct teaching for our students to make this move.
Thank you so much for diving in deeper with all of that and bringing up the connection back to goal one, like that root cause analysis, which is essentially sounds like a needs assessment, a deep dive needs assessment, and then tying it back to the progress monitoring we've been doing around our goals and really seeing the data continually about like who needs the most support and how we tie that back with the development of the 2025 budget. So however we can best get that information that's appropriate for us to have around this specific, these designations, these schools, other schools too, that helps us best support the work is just really, I can't think of another word than exciting in terms of opportunity to really lift it up and better support it. So thank you for really going in deeper on all those different levels and pointing out some examples. So I'm going to pass the mic at this point, but thank you.
Thank you for your questions.
Thank you. I have a couple questions as well. So you said a lot when you said it's not about how much you have, but what you do with it. So my question goes into the planning space in terms of what additional support are we providing the leaders in the school as well as the GO teams who are helping the leaders make these decisions about what to do with the budget, the ones who are asking the questions. What additional support are they getting to help them move off of this list?
Okay. I'm looking out at our associate superintendents because they've been very intentional this year when sitting down with principals and their budgets on how to best utilize those budgets. I like being transparent. We send the money needs to go closest to the classrooms. We can't keep being top heavy in the central office nor in our schools. So we have to push that money down into the classroom. So I know associate superintendents have been meeting with principals, giving them support. I know principals have been calling HR because HR is calling me and I'm saying, hold tight. You can't have a school without a counselor. There are certain things that we're going to keep in our district. We can't allow those things to happen. You can't, okay, I'm going to keep this person, so I'm going to make my attendance clerk part-time. No, we're not going to do that. If you're telling me you have an attendance issue, why are you trying to make your attendance clerk part-time? Can I get an amen? Just I'm just trying to keep it real, really real, for real. So we have to hold tight. I'm telling you, the pressure's always coming. I tell people we just got to hold tight and do what's right for children. I said we have to stop doing what we like and do what's right.
Excellent. Another question I have is you talked about turnaround dollars. Can you speak a little bit, what are those, how are they allocated, and are those included in Dr. Bracken's calculations when she's calculating how much a school has?
Yes, I'm going to look right at Lisa Bracken and Sherry. Sherry's our turnaround. So Terry, you can come up and she can tell her how much each group gets.
And then you also address the funding cliff. So after you move from off the list, you no longer are seeing these dollars. So
No, you do.
So talk about how you've addressed
Yeah.
the funding cliff. So now it might be a
kind of goes to that roller
decline.
coaster thing, right? So you've put some supports in place and some actions and strategies, and so then you do well enough to get off a list. And again, that's not enough. Our goal is not list, but making sure our students are proficient, right? And so if you come off a list, if we remove all of those supports, then you have a greater likelihood of doing the roller coaster, right? And so we look at a 3-year process. And so if you're on the state CSI list, you get funds from the district under 3 buckets. So you're required to have a reading and a math specialist. And then the other buckets are for wraparound support, so additional wraparound support based on your data, and extended learning. Are you doing tutors, after-school tutoring? Are you doing Saturday school? We really give that option to the schools, but they go under those 3 buckets. It's just over, and Lisa, you can correct me, it's just over $650,000 per CSI school because of the heavy lift of what they're doing. If you're a first year off of CSI, so we have quite a few schools this year that are no longer identified as CSI. Again, we don't want to remove all of those supports. So where a CSI school would have a SES, a school effectiveness specialist, and a school improvement specialist, the Metro RESA, and they do the work around their short-term action plan aligned to their school improvement plan. When you don't have the state and RESA support, that's where our team then goes in side by side with our associate SUBs and the principals to continue that work. And the funds are reduced a little, but still enough that they could still keep a reading and a math specialist if they wanted. And they still spend that money under those 3 buckets because we know those are direct to our students. If you're a TSI or an ATSI, it's based on your subgroup data. All the subgroups for us that are identified right now are under special ed. And so we have provided additional funds, either 1 FTE for TSI or 2 FTEs for ATSI. But those FTEs have to specifically support how you're identified. So those supports have to be with our special ed support. I'm working closely with Chelsea Montgomery and her team because we also write a district effectiveness plan, or a district support plan. So what are we doing above and beyond for the schools that are identified than what everybody else gets? So if everybody else gets this, what are we doing as that additional layer? So it's a 3-year process. So if you're coming off the list, you're in year 1, you get these funds. Year 2, it's reduced each year so that you build a sustainability. If you're always counting on people and you're not building a sustainability plan, you will never reach where you need to be. So looking at that, helping support that work is where we've had schools that have been off for years based on that scaffolding.
And where does that 600,000 per school come from?
That comes from my friend Lisa Bracken. Actually, in their budgets, we do have a separate tab that says turnaround so that they can see specifically what it is and that they spend in those buckets, but I'll let the smarter person speak.
So the funding that comes directly through our turnaround strategy is general fund, which is funded through local revenue, state, that pot of money that gets redistributed that way. And it is on their template. So when they're building their budgets, they see it as part of their overall portfolio of funding.
So it's added on after you've done all your math and the
SSF is over
SSF?
here, and this comes
Okay.
in on top of it. It's one of those layered on, like signature programming is for our schools as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. I'm good for now, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to build on. I think actually Board Member Baldwin asked a lot of the questions I wanted to ask. Let me just say, I don't love these lists. I feel like we're focused on we're focused on, it feels like CCRPI all over again, where folks can't completely understand. I much prefer to focus on what % of our kids are reading, what % of our kids are on grade level, and things we care about versus these, I mean, even us insiders, I'm like, which one's a CSI, which one's an ATS, and that I feel that obfuscates and hazes the work. That being said, the work needs to get done. How are we handling, I have 2 questions. How are we handling the communication to the schools? Because this can often sound punitive and that kids are doing something wrong when it's the adults that need to support kids do this work. How are we handling that communication?
You want to? No. But we send notices, the state send, like the notice we sent you all to let schools know that they've been identified by the state, but also to let them know that we're here to support them. Because we know that's not the all and be all. Like I just mentioned, there are schools on this list that are performing better than schools that are not on this list, and that's why we need to not look at this list. We need to, although it's important because it's a state identification, that shouldn't be our interim guardrail. We need to focus on proficiency in our schools.
And then back to, we talked about the $650,000. How separate is that from, so you mentioned it was a separate budget tab, but are schools building their budget and is that locked? Does that become something that's separate from their strategy, or does that become an additional set of resources that can supplement? I'm nervous that we have 2 different strategies arriving at the train.
So it's the same. So the work that we talked about, a comprehensive needs assessment, we're getting ready to move into that next work for next year, right? And so looking at our current school improvement plan, looking at your data, you're doing a comprehensive needs assessment based on your current data and where you're going. they build their school improvement plan to implement. Again, it's a living, breathing document. This isn't one of those that we just cut and paste and put it on a shelf, right? So it's their school improvement plan. So everything that they do is aligned to their data, and then the funding to support that goes in there. So they're very strategic. And then our schools that are in turnaround do what's called a short-term action plan. It's a requirement by the state, but there's such good benefit because you're not doing your school improvement plan for a year, and at the end of the year you go, whoops, that did not work, right? It is just an ongoing progress monitoring. So every 45 days out of our year-long plan, this is the part that we are doing and focusing on, collecting the data. We're on the right path, or we have to tweak, then move into the next piece. And so really being that strategic, and then your funding goes directly to the work that you need as a school. So even though there's 3 buckets and so many schools, every school looks a little different on what they need. So when you do the wraparound support, some schools say, I need an additional counselor. I need additional social work. So based on their data, they can make those decisions.
And the GO teams have their fingerprints on those recommendations?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think most of my questions were answered for the most part. I just want to acknowledge, just in terms of what we're seeing, obviously some of the spaces is what is working. And I really appreciate you uplifting the need for, because my question really went to how are we planning for sustainability, and how are we planning for the continuous work, knowing that once these schools come off the list, that funding is gone. And, you know, so I just want to acknowledge that. My questions and answers through that, but I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I don't know, Sheriff, people know your background was our turnaround specialist. You were our turnaround specialist for,
So,
yeah, I'm like, just want to give you a little shine.
I got my secret life. So when I was here before as the director of continuous improvement, I left for 2 years as a school effectiveness specialist. So I was the state lady, and now I've come back with Dr. Battle, and I have Turnaround back with me.
Just want to give you a little shine. You know what you're talking about. Thank you. I appreciate it.
About the third time, I almost did that. No, thank you so much, Dr. Battle, for this presentation. As I look at the list and I look at the students who are targeted for interventions, it's our students with disabilities. As a person who currently teaches only interrelated classes, who served as a special education teacher myself for 6 years, that tends to be the population of students who consistently need the interventions the most. What strategies do we have in place that we're finding to be most effective when it comes to addressing the needs of those students? And what innovations or additional interventions can we identify that perhaps we have not implemented yet that we should be implementing so we can get better outcomes?
Yes, and I'm looking out. We work closely with our coordinators in our special ed department, but one of those strategies that works is realizing that most of our special ed students have an average IQ. So the expectation that they can do is to encourage them and work with them and set that expectation. Another thing that works is making sure we're teaching those kids the standards on grade level, because a lot of times we look back and really we're not teaching them. They haven't been exposed to the curriculum. And if these students are not exposed, how do we expect them to pass an assessment? So it's more work on our part, doing what we need to do in strategies, as well as having those expectations for all of our students.
So one more thing before Chelsea comes up. She's our expert, but I was a co-teacher back in the day. One of the requirements of our ATSI schools by the state is a deep dive or a review of our current IEPs, right? So making sure that as students move through elementary to middle to high, that IEP individualized has been updated as students go, meeting their needs as they go through each grade band, and not coming to high school with the same thing that they have. So a real strong review of the IEPs will be required.
Dr. Battle nailed it, but I can add a few more things if you'd like me to. A couple things that are innovative and new is our inclusive practice specialists. This is their second year. And just for example, some of the work that we've been doing with Dr. Goodwine and her cluster specifically, really leaning into what does good co-taught classroom instruction look like and how do we provide for those inclusive practices across disabilities. Something we really leaned into and gotten really good responses, especially from support from our classroom teachers. One thing that we have also leaned into is our CTI teachers, so our transition teachers at high school. And I think based on how many high schools are on this new identification list, I'm really interested to see how much our work aligns with the areas that the state has identified. We're just not quite sure yet because it's new. And then next year, we're looking to also have a progress monitoring tool for special education goals that's normed. So you can actually see if students are making progress towards closing that gap. It is in a 6 to 8 week increment. So kind of game changing as far as looking at growth rate on those goals. So that's one thing to look forward to next year as well.
Well, thank you so much. Having done hundreds of IEPs myself, I know how important those documents are, but one of the areas that I see so much potential for in terms of instruction is how much time are we spending understanding how well the IEPs are being executed. I tend to find that we pay a lot of attention to the things like lesson plans and IEPs and the things that adults are essentially just trying to CYA on. But when it comes to the implementation of these documents, I'm not seeing a level of accountability that I would like to see across the board, not just here in APS, but across the board, and wondering, what are we doing to ensure that children are getting the accommodations and interventions that are on these documents, not just that they are there.
I would say with those new specialists that Chelsea just mentioned, as well as principals, when you go into a classroom to observe, you're not just looking at what the teacher's doing, you're looking what the students are doing, ensuring that those students are getting the quality education, knowing which students have IEPs, sometimes not knowing which ones do have IEPs, you can tell how much work is getting done with that student. When you walk into a co-taught classroom and you see two teachers teaching and all students are getting grade level standards being taught, that's a first hint right there that we're moving forward in the right direction. So there's work to be done. There's clearly work to be done, but we are identifying pockets of success, having those leaders being the ones in the forefront for our district, helping to better all of our schools with our special needs students.
I understand that that there is a whole separate category and a whole separate way of dealing with charter and partner schools, both through the state and internally. However, I would like to know whether the charter and partner schools on these lists are also required to make additional investments to correct the deficiencies that have put them on the list and help them get off, noting that a majority of the schools on our CSI list are charter and partner schools. Also, are there best practices? Are there effective initiatives that we have instituted in our traditional schools, the ones that have come off that list, that we can share with those charter and partner schools in order to help move them off the list as well?
Yeah. And I guess I need to say this, to be fair to our charter schools, why you see so many is because our charter schools, their fifth graders are in their middle school, but the state counts fifth graders as elementary schools. So if it's a school that a K-4, you're going to be on the elementary and the middle school, and the upper grades, because those fifth graders are counted as elementary students. So that's what I will say that for our charter schools. And I just learned that after meeting with the state last week. Because, I was concerned. I mean, I'm still concerned, but I was more concerned, but it gave me a little, I can breathe a little bit. It's almost like how Hollis, they're considered elementary and middle, even though we have just one campus.
Yeah.
So
Or
just,
Hank Aaron's considered middle and high.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
And
Yes,
Hank
like
too on
exactly. But I will say working with our charter schools and accountability, they, and I don't know what they've done in the past, but I know that with our literacy work and other work, they want to be a part of it. They want to be a part of it. They know they need support. There are some things we can learn from them in some of their schools, and there are things that we can learn and they can learn from us. So basically partnering with this work, because they're all our students. So we have opened our door wide open. I've noticed they've been attending some of our principals' meetings, some of our expanded cabinet meetings. So just knowing that we're working together, because it's going to take all of us to move this work, because we know our students, sometimes they're in charter, sometimes they're in traditional, so they go back and forth from time to time. So just making sure, and they have been very receptive. Matt Underwood, who's here, has been working closely on both sides. So I think this is like a breath of fresh air to say that we're working together. And I know he wants to come up and say something. Come on, Matt.
Well, and while you're coming forward, Matt, I just note that some of our schools, our traditional schools, which have come off the list, are located very close geographically to some of the charter and partner schools that are on the list. And so we're dealing with, in some cases, very similar neighborhoods, very similar kids, very similar families. And if there are things that we are doing that are successful, then if we can share those in hopes of helping these other schools get off the list, that would be great.
Absolutely.
But are they required to make additional investments in order to get the schools off the list in the same way that Sherry was describing that we do?
Yes, so, and for those of you that don't know, I'm Matt Underwood, the Executive Director of the Office of Charter and Partner Schools at APS. So yes, the charter and partner schools that are on one of those federally identified schools lists go through the same process with the state of establishing a action plan. They receive additional funding from the state to implement some of those interventions, and so they go through a very similar process as to what the district-run schools go through. And then additionally, as Dr. Battle was referring to, we've begun working more closely with the Office of School Turnaround for charter and partner schools to have access to some of the supports and interventions that have proven effective at some of the district-run schools that have come off the list. And then vice versa, because we have some of our partner schools that have been on the comprehensive support and improvement list that came off all of these lists this year too. So I think there's lessons to be learned from all these schools. So,
Good. Thank you very much.
sure. You're welcome.
Yes, Board Member Johnson, do you have any questions? Okay, great. Yes, you may, Board Member Alden.
Okay, so we talked about how the schools are identified has changed.
Yes.
And how it changed from one year to the other. And I just want to clarify, and apologies because I couldn't clarify it earlier because I didn't see this. This says the lowest 5% on here, for CSI, but on the questions that were answered for me, it said it went from the lowest 10% to the lowest 20. So can you tell me how they have identified the CSI schools?
The CSI schools should be the lowest performing Title I schools that represent the bottom 5% of all schools eligible for identification.
Okay, so I'll ask my other questions later because
Okay,
my
so let's see.
answers are different.
Okay.
And if it's 5 now, was it 2.5 before, or it's
No.
5 and still 5?
It's 5 and still 5. For FY22, they only measured mastery and readiness.
Okay.
In FY23, they measured mastery, readiness, closing the gap, and progress.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. This concludes our work session for today.
Thank you, everyone, for your reports. Madam General Counsel, is there a reason the board need to retreat into executive session?
Madam Chair, yes, the board needs to discuss student, personnel, land, and legal matters.
Okay. Is there a motion to enter into executive session to discuss student discipline, personnel, legal, or real estate matters?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Board Member Johnson, second by Board Member Briscoe Brown. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Now we will go into executive session, and we'll be back.